Marketers, you know that feeling when your content just works? When you crush a viral trend before 10 a.m.? When one tiny tweak to a landing page sends click-through rates through the roof? That's Contentful. Dynamic content made blissfully simple. Contentful helps you create and launch personalized experiences instantly across any digital channel. No stress, no limits, only possibilities. Come get the feels at Contentful.com.
Hello and welcome to SATB 225A, for this will be a two-parter, and it is Beatles Olympiad, which I'll explain in a second, but we're taking a little bit of a break from the Get Back analysis and the Peter Jackson three-part interview, which I hope you all heard and hope you all enjoyed as much as I did. It was an amazing, amazing experience, and it certainly is not the last we'll be talking about Get Back, because as you'll note, that conversation took place before we had seen it, and of course, there's been plenty of reaction we've had as we're all processing it since. Another show in the can, The Musician's Take, which you'll be hearing in January 2022, but there'll be other angles we'll be coming at it from as well. In any event, taking a little break from that, doing something lighter. This is Beatles Olympiad, which simply means going through the Beatle albums and rating gold, silver, and bronze among personal favorite cuts, starting in order with the British releases, Gary Wenstrup and I, who prevail upon me to basically document and put out the kind of conversations we have whenever we get together anyway, as I'm sure all of you guys do. It's something that I've kind of steered clear of in the past. Previous iteration of the show, we did that sort of thing, but I just didn't want to put it out there as though my opinions mean more than yours. And Gary's like, no. Well, they do, because you're an author and historian, blah, 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 blah. I still don't necessarily buy that, but I did think it was an interesting exercise to, number one, as a sort of snapshot of what your tastes are at a given moment. But also, at base, when a person responds to art, their immediate thing is how it makes them feel, whatever resonance it may have in them. And I think there's sort of a natural tendency, sort of a preemptive defensiveness that some of us feel about having to defend anything we like, as though making our opinion known will instantly subject it to some kind of attack. And that's basically what is meant by guilty pleasures, things we enjoy that we know people will tear us down for or come at us for because they're indefensible in their eyes. But I think that you're going to like what you like for reasons that aren't quantifiable, that you can't necessarily enumerate. But despite that sort of knowledge and that position, I found myself throughout the course of the conversation coming up with reasons over and over again of, well, I like this because this plus this. And really, the reasons don't matter. It's great if you have them, but you're allowed to like whatever you want for no reason at all. That aside, I do find that there are things that I enjoy or once enjoyed, then didn't enjoy, but now I found reason to enjoy them again for a quantifiable reason. Specifically, I'm thinking about songs I liked when they first came out that I've gotten tired of and don't need to hear again, but then I discover one of my kids is really into them, and that gives me a reason to enjoy them again because of something that they remind me of when I hear them. It's like, oh yeah. So I guess despite ourselves, we find reasons to enjoy things that are reasons beyond whatever take we get out of them purely on the feeling they evoke when we hear them. So that's basically the gist of this conversation, which hopefully we'll all enjoy because it'll be something that you recognize that you've had many a time with your Beatle friends as well. But beyond that, I did want to, again, thank Peter Jackson for coming on to the show, for giving so generously of his time and his insight, and hopefully that will not be the last of that. But as he had indicated in the last hour of the interview, he is very interested in getting our input on what should go in an extended cut, should there be one. So that's two different things. The fun part is offering up what should be in there. But the part that requires a little bit of effort is the actual putting it out there, prevailing upon Disney, we want an extended cut, because that's what they'll respond to. And I'd put it out there. We'd gotten that wonderful piece in Forbes online about Peter Jackson and coming to SATB. And I'd ask people on social media, on Twitter specifically, to repost it, like it, retweet it, that sort of thing, because I think those quantifiable numbers will show what muscle the listenership of this show has. And so if you haven't done that, by all means, I'm encouraging you, just as a show of strength of what Sappy listeners can do, and also as a thank you to Peter Jackson, to spread that around everywhere we possibly can. I think that's a thing that will get noticed and should be noticed, and just as a sort of test run for what really our goal will be ultimately, which is pushing for an extended cut. So I'll try to get some more information on that so that we'll be most effective in our efforts when the time comes. But consider that, and also posting any reviews of the show. If you're enjoying Sappy, if you're new to it, if you've been liking what you're hearing, you've never done a review on, say, Apple or anywhere else, now would be the time. Just go for it, because it all counts. And I think it just creates the sort of critical mass to keep this going and maybe keep big personas coming to us. Who can say? But anyway, happy holidays to everybody who celebrates something around this time of year. But if you do, I don't want to be presumptuous, be safe, and hopefully everybody will have something joyous to experience this season. So today's topic, which is something that long since the show changed direction, 100 episodes or so back, I've consciously steered clear of opinion shows. That we did a bunch of those in the beginning, what is me and a regular co-host, where we would reimagine existing Beatle albums in terms of what we would drop, how we would reshuffle them, what we would add, that sort of thing, which is kind of valid. I think that now that Beatle podcasts have become ubiquitous since I started this, I mean, they're like mushrooms popping up every week to varying degrees, and I can't really speak to the quality of them, really, because apart from the times I've appeared on other people's shows, I don't listen to them. And it's not because I'm snobby or making any judgments. It's because I don't have the bandwidth. As I pointed out in the last show with Pat Sansone discussing Pepper, if I've got the time to edit a show, my ears are occupied. And so I don't have too many situations where my ears are at liberty to listen to other people's stuff. They're either used on my own behalf or they're otherwise engaged. So I can't really speak to other people's podcasts. But on the other hand, I'm aware enough of things that I get that a lot of Beatle-themed podcasts focus on specific albums or rankings of things. And that's not something I've spent a lot of time on. If I'm going to focus on an album, it's usually more than one album, or it's a specific period discussing the creation of what was going on in the particular ex-Beatle or the Beatles when it was being created, some aspect of it. I don't discuss the entirety of an album per se all the way through. I don't do that kind of thing. I just try to find other angles to come at it with. And so coming up with favorites and weighing in and this is what I think, there's sort of a implicit, because I think this, and being my position, a published Beatle author, whatever else you want to call me, it's somehow superior a judgment. Now, Gary, my guest on this show, my returning guest, was the one that sort of lobbied me. It's like, well, your opinion means something. So otherwise, I wouldn't freely offer it as if it means anything. But I guess for the purposes of facilitating discussion, I could see where what I think might mean something, but I'm not expecting people to agree with it or switch whatever their thoughts have been to this point. It's my 2 cents, and it's no more valid than anybody else's, although he would say that it is more valid and whatever. Not to me, it isn't. And the other thing about Beatles is just generally, I think as we go through our decades of fandom, certainly our opinions tend to shift. I know that's been true of me. There's definitely been things that I liked, that I esteemed a lot higher when I was younger than I do now, and maybe things that I've sort of rediscovered along the way that I think, oh, wow, this is a really good song, and I never really gave it enough credit. So this is a snapshot of where we are now, and we're going to attempt to, probably over the course of several shows, go through the albums bit by bit and sort of rank Olympic style our gold, silver, and bronze favorite tracks off the albums and talk about why. So, Gary, is that a fair summary of our intent here?
That is a fair summary. And I do think that your opinion, because of your knowledge and your publishing background, is worth knowing, sort of how you weigh in on particular songs. I get your submission that it's your opinion and everyone's got one, sort of thing.
And I don't want to go down the road of quantifying it. You know, it's like it's art we're talking about. And ultimately, there's plenty of things we love that speak to us, that resonate with us, that move us. that if we had to give a reason why, we might be able to come up with something. But ultimately, there's things we like just because we like them, and we cannot defend it. They're called guilty pleasures.
Sure, it touches us emotionally.
Yeah, we cannot justify it. And I don't want to get into the intellectual aspect of justifying some, well, this is where they were all working together as a team and breaking new ground, because so what? That doesn't matter to most people. If you enjoy a record, it's not because of what it represents as an achievement on paper. It's because it moves you. And there might be things that might be a step backward that you love for whatever reason and aren't defensible in those quantifiable terms. So we're trying to get to what we like and not get too intellectual about it.
Agreed. And I think the bottom line, this should be fun.
It will be fun.
What could be better than discussing favorite Beatles songs? And listeners will hopefully pull out, their album, their CD, look at the track list, and maybe come up with their own. And I think that's fun to follow along.
Sure. And another observation, I know it was true of me when I was young, and it may be true of some fans now. I have heard this anecdotally from people, especially fans of our age. We're middle-aged guys wearing glasses doing this stuff, opining on things, which it's more than a dime a dozen on YouTube and everywhere else. But here we are. And when we were young and the Beatle literary canon was so much more reduced. I mean, specifically, the books that tend to be spoken of back in the 70s are Beatles Forever by Nicholas Schaffner and Illustrated Record by Carr and Tyler. Those were books more so Illustrated Record than Schaffner's book, but a lot of that stuff was heavily, it was rock criticism. It was opining from the authors. You take that where we were in the position of being influenced as we're sort of discovering and navigating the territory. They come out and say, oh, well, this record was shite, or this was the highest achievement. Whether we want to or not, that tends to get absorbed into our consciousness and sort of factoring into how we like something, along with, and Lennon was the one that did this the most, of course, through the course of Lennon Remembers and then Playboy interview at the end. He's weighing in on his opinions of Beatles songs and being dismissive of an awful lot of songs that we revere. I'm wondering how many people still carry that influence. If it's like, oh, well, John said it's only lovely garbage, so he's right, yeah. Or do we get past and go, wait a minute, this is a good song. I like this. So you try to, as your fandom evolves, sort of recognize what is your real take, not influenced by the stuff that you absorbed at an early age. So I think we're at a safe enough distance for me personally, at least, and I'm sure it might be true of you too, that we don't care what's cool or uncool. We don't care what John thought or anybody else thought. This is our unvarnished opinions on stuff.
Right. And I sort of look at that as the things that we read, Lennon or books, that was just information that went into the blender. Mm-hmm. And we stirred it up, and now we're pouring out our opinion. We've recognized what they've said, but bottom line, this is how we feel.
Personally, when you were absorbing this stuff back when, and I suspect being younger, if you were doing this in real time, you would have been a little bit more subject to the sway of, oh, well, this is one of the creators that's saying this. Did you find yourself agreeing, objecting, being surprised, or otherwise coming under the spell of, wow, if John thinks that, maybe he's right. Maybe this is a slight piece of work or something. How did you react to that?
Maybe it's my arrogance. The first time I remember sort of John's opinions being shared was obviously the Playboy interview. And I read it and I just shook my head. I'm like, he's nuts. Wait, the song on Help that I love in particular, You're Gonna Lose That Girl.
Yeah.
I think totally dismissive of it. It's brilliant. I love it. So I take it with a grain of salt, but I discount that. I judge by my own ears.
So you were never particularly influenced by that sort of thing?
I don't think so. Of the backstory to songs, what inspired them, what led to them. But generally, no, I trust my own ears.
So at the end of the day, would you say that what constitutes favorites for you, or how you mentally rank them, is how they move you, how they make you feel, more than necessarily being the sum of whatever backstory or opinions coming from a source that you respect might have impacted you?
I'm sure they did, Robert. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I'm sure they did influence. And I think where they influence is probably the backstory to the song, or maybe a lyrical idea or approach that I didn't catch with my own ears. So I'm sure that's part of what went into the blender. But the songs I've selected are songs that excite me.
Mm-hmm. So it's an intangible aspect that isn't necessarily quantifiable. It's nice if you've got that. There's been instances with me where it might not be a backstory, but you come across something that makes you look at it or hear it a little bit differently. And just to pull one example out of the air, Octopus's Garden. I don't know how many people that would be in their top 3 or 5 list of anything.
Yeah.
At best, most people enjoy it or recognize, oh, it's Ringo being charming, Ringo doing Ringo, or some people see it as Yellow Submarine Mach 2 or whatever. I was one of those people that I liked it. I appreciated the guitar playing on it. When you're younger, it's a sing-along song or whatever. But as an adult, you're like, if you're around other people while it's on, you might be tempted to cringe or skip it or whatever. But it was at whatever point I read, there was a contemporaneous interview George did with, I forget which publication it was. So we're talking autumn of 1969. He and Paul and John all did interviews promoting Abbey Road. And it's the George interview where he's going through it track by track, and he gets to Octopus's Garden, and he makes the remark about the imagery in there, you know, calm beneath the storm, and says, Ringo writes his cosmic songs without knowing it. And I thought, you know, that was a really, besides being sweet, it's a nice little insight because there are different layers to these things. And even if that was not Ringo's intent, so hearing it beyond the surface level of it's a song based on Ringo's epiphany that octopuses do these arrangements of shiny objects in their little nests or whatever. And it came when he was depressed. He'd walked out of the Beatles. And then this was an insight that sort of cheered him up, and no one there to tell us what to do. That line always jumped out at me. But George's little added insight gave it another layer to me that's like, oh, you know, he's right. So I'd be lying if I said that that didn't influence my esteem for the song now.
Yeah.
Because it got me to hear it a different way. So,
and that's a perfect example. And for me, an example of that, though it may not be in my top 3, Paul's Let It Be. Once you understand that the reference to Mother Mary is his own mom, who died, he was a teenager, that adds a whole new level of resonance to that song.
Yeah. And I would think that because he's not the Beatle most noteworthy for putting his personal life into his music, and when he does, it tends to be sort of oblique. I do think he does it more than people give him credit for, but he sees his role as an artist to appeal and be universal as much to as large an audience as possible. And he's not John post Yoko, our life is our art, therefore it's not authentic if it's not directly by name John Yoko. That approach was not for Paul. So that's why I think it tends to mask some of the inner life that Paul did put out that is just less obvious because he didn't use words like Paul and Linda in his songs.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right, then. So shall we start at the top?
Sure. So we'll start with the Please Please Me album. I'll tee off first, as it were, and just indication that we're not trying to be overly intellectual.
No problem.
And go where the critics go. My bronze goes to Do You Want to Know a Secret?
Ooh.
John wrote it for George. I mean, even I will admit it's a throwaway, but I love it. I think George's vocal, he's comfortable, he's confident. I like how he hits the I'm with a bit of gravel in his voice. And for me, the melody flows smoothly, easily, and there's a nice descending guitar line in it. Not a major piece of work. John says it's a throwaway. I don't necessarily disagree, but it's a throwaway I thoroughly enjoy.
It's funny you picked that as your bronze because that was my bronze too. And the reason, to build on what you said, yeah, it's a simple song. A throwaway, you know, there's plenty of great records that are slight in content, but that's a song that it sounds like it was always around. It's got sort of a standard quality to it. If I didn't know the Beatles wrote it, John wrote it, I would have thought it was some 50s song that lots of people covered because there's a universality about it. It's always had that feel for me. And in fact, when I was in my earliest days of fandom, I wasn't even sure, is this a cover too? Because it just sounds like something that's been around forever. And of course, Billy J. Kramer did it too, although I didn't come to awareness of that till well into my fandom because it wasn't the kind of thing that was a big enough hit here. It would still be in rotation on the radio. But the song undeniably has a charm. I would say that the overall performance is powerful enough that I would call it slightly more than a throwaway in terms of there's plenty of slight pop records circa 63 that might fit more that description. But I think that the performance transcends the material. You described that, his inflection in the word and it's funny because that makes me think of some of his vocal performances on the Decca auditions, where he does have a bit more grit than he would in his vocals going forward. Still the stage voice that he had, I suppose. But there's something about it that, and it does have the sort of a 50s-ish aspect to it that I guess it projects a sort of naive innocence that actually was genuinely naive and innocent, because for what all they were doing in the Sin district of Hamburg, I think they were still Liverpool kids at heart. They hadn't gotten that cynical and hard yet, but I don't know. There's something about it that I think it's more than a throwaway, but certainly not optimum Beatles. But it all comes together there. It's a great band performance.
Yeah. And I think you used a key word. There's a charm to it. And a charm to it. Agreed.
Yeah.
So my silver goes to I Saw Her Standing There. You got to love how Paul just attacks the vocal, the ripoff of Little Richard's whoos, just an exciting, wonderful hook that you can't wait till it comes around again. I think the bridge that, my heart went boom when I crossed that room. It's a great rhyme, number one. I'm not sure I've ever heard room and boom, rhymed prior to that. And then at the end, he holds that falsetto mine for an extended time. That's exciting. And the fact that he's holding that for so long and the rest of the song is sort of clipped, it's quick rhythm, how he sings it. So that even stands out more and adds to the excitement of that moment. So I guess the song is just full of exciting little moments, the woos, the boom room, the falsetto mine, just a series of wonderful little moments.
Mm-hmm. Well, you put me in a position here because that was my gold.
Great.
So I guess I should discuss it now before going to my silver. But that's a song that I think, and I still hear it on the radio, and it still pops. It was the opening track on their album. It was a fairly recent composition because apparently they wrote it in October of 62. There's that photograph Mike McCartney took at Fortland where they're sitting opposite each other with their acoustic guitars. John's got the glasses on, and they're looking down on a notebook. That is apparently the documentation of them working through the writing of I Saw Her Standing There. And you've got that cavern recording of them rehearsing it very early on where John's putting the harmonica on it. So they're still kind of finding its feet on that song. Do we do it like with this affectation that we've been applying, like our first single and the next couple as well? It took them a while to figure out. And the song that a part of it is based on, and people have pointed to When the Saints Go Marching In as influencing the structure. And that may be. That was never obvious to me. I see it now that it's pointed out, but it's like, so what? More obvious was the Talking About You by Chuck Berry. But even then, you become aware of that fact, but I still don't listen to it thinking, they're ripping off Chuck Berry here. It's not that obvious to me. I mean, yes, when you point them out and show them side by side, but again, it's got enough strength on its own to transcend its influences. Yes, it's a basic rock and roll track. And another thing I find interesting about it is I don't know that they necessarily, when they cut it in the studio, had the immediate idea in their head, this is what's going to lead off the album. Because it was not the first song tracked. There's a Place was. So I'm not sure when they were recording that day, February 11th, what went into the idea of the sequencing, what songs they did first, Putting in the count off was kind of a tell because that didn't apply to any of the other tracks they did. So maybe that was part of the weight saying, well, this has got to start things off because they'd always referred to it as sort of a snapshot of their live act. Well, you're starting a show counting off the first song. It makes sense to do that. And I always thought that Taxman, the way it starts off, was a deliberate evocation of that. But that's a whole separate discussion. Anyway, the way they attack that song, they've got it now honed. It's very controlled and disciplined. Yeah, they've got the woos and the screams and all that stuff. But you compare that to the way they performed it live. And what I'm thinking of is 1 year to the day exactly after they tracked the studio release, they're in Washington, D.C., having just conquered America on the Ed Sullivan stage days before. And it's a very different performance. It's much more raucous. Ringo's going crazy on the cymbals and the kick, and the screams are much more exuberant. And, they're putting on a show as opposed to making a record. So that's where they're unleashing the potential that was only hinted at in the studio. But to me, it's an evergreen. The intellectual reasons I can give you, John and Paul collaborated on it. John gave him that great line, "You know what I mean." There's all those reasons, but at the end of the day, they don't matter. It's just the performance. It's the way it makes you feel. It's the way that song that could sound dated or old-fashioned or quaint still pops. My kids, like most kids, are very leery of anything that might make them cringe from their parents' time or, anything that's not of the present day. They enjoy that song. So that gives me an added layer of enjoyment to it as well. So to me, it didn't make it to the Red Album, but I think it's as good a standard as anything they ever did.
Yeah, agreed. So my goal is Please Please Me. I'm not as smart as you are when it comes to sort of musical definition, but I like the Ringo's drumming in particular, sort of the Brazilian kind of rhythm that he has on the verses, and then his very aggressive fills at the end of the song. George's guitar runs are great. Paul's falsetto background vocal throughout the Beatles' career, I think, is so underrated. Just his wonderful falsetto work with John is incredible, particularly at the end of this song. It is so sexually suggestive, which, to your point, I never knew back in the day. It's only, I think, somewhat recently, probably when I hit my 20s or something, that I sort of got it. And I think somebody had to point it out at me. I wasn't the one who sort of undressed it, if you will.
Didn't Tyler and Carr said that the song was something evoking heavy petting, the phrase?
I don't know. And maybe that's where I read and it triggered him like, oh, yeah, gosh. And speaking of the lyrics, what a great opening line. Last night I said these words to my love. I mean, that catches your ear like, whoa. Well, I'm right there with them. We're having a conversation. What did he say last night? Where's this going to go? And I think that's fascinating. That's an incredibly cool opening line.
Yeah, you're being shared something in confidence is what it comes off like.
Yeah.
And that's something they had a gift for. Like She Loves You being another example of that. It's relating a conversation about people Chuck Berry was like a master of, even though he's a grown-ass man at the time he's doing these recordings, of getting inside the heads of teenagers and speaking and relating their world in song in a way that instantly resonated with them. And so the Beatles, wittingly or unwittingly, I've never read of them necessarily saying, yeah, we were trying to emulate or put something out there in the way that our fans, the way they spoke to each other, because they were of that group of people. They saw themselves as one with their audience, at least through the Cavern days, as they did express. So it's interesting that as a songwriting technique, I don't know that they consciously did that, but that is exactly the way it's coming off. And it's something that evolved into other things as time went on.
Your thoughts about it, or maybe this is your silver?
That was a tough one for me because I think between that and I Saw Her Standing There, those were the two that were my gold. It's like I had to go back and forth. And ultimately, I opted for The Underdog because Please Please Me has gotten its accolades, even if some people don't recognize it as being a number one, which George Martin did in real time. No sooner did they track it. But it's a remarkable record. It's unbelievable. And I don't know if you've heard the Air Check tape. Maybe you have, from WLS in 1963.
No.
It's apparently late February, early March when Dick Biondi is spinning it on WLS. So we know it's a VJ record. That's a record label up the street from the WLS radio station. It makes it onto the Silver Dollar survey for 2 straight weeks, March 8th and March 15th, 1963, before vanishing. It starts out in the bottommost position at 40. The next week it goes up to 35. After that, it's gone forever. Beatles spelled with 2 T's. And there is a tape that was on YouTube. They used to have a full length, like 10 or 15 minute Air Check. Now I think it's just a little bit of it, but you hear Dick Biondi introducing it. You listen to the fuller length Air Check, and you're hearing Steve Lawrence, Gene Pitney doing a song called Mecca, which is not a big hit nowadays that gets played a lot. There's a commercial for the Birds from Alfred Hitchcock. So when you hear Please Please Me alongside the other contemporary fare in the top 40 that charted more successfully, it really pops. It really sticks out as like, wow, these guys must have landed from another galaxy or something, because it doesn't mesh with the other stuff that's out there in a way that when you hear those other songs, it instantly sort of transports you to, whether you were there or not, 1963 AM radio. It has that oldies sort of feel to it. And maybe it's just our subjectivity being Beatle fans that it's always going to sound different to us. But when you hear that record alongside everything else, it's like, wow, this is really different. And maybe they were just too ahead of the curve here for American audiences, because certainly it didn't get the traction in Chicago. A year later, after I Want to Hold Your Hand, Americans were ready for it. But the Brits were ready for it after Love Me Do. So buying it in the vast quantities they did. So it's an amazing, amazing record. You said your revelation was finding out the sexual subtext to it. Mine was reading years later on that they had taken some of the vocal arrangement from Kathy's Clown, from the Everly Brothers, in terms of the harmony. And once I heard that, I couldn't unhear it. It's like, oh, I get it. I'm not going to be the one to sing it for you, but just listen to them side by side and you'll hear what I'm talking about. An amazing purposing of something from a totally different record. And then, of course, there's the added element, well, it started out as a slow Roy Orbison tune. And Jared Lakides, if I'm saying his name right, is a musician with a band called The Lunar Laugh. Look them up, folks. He did some years ago, and I found it. It's no longer on YouTube, but he actually did the Roy Orbison version of Please Please Me, and it was brilliant. It was unbelievable. I think I've had it on the show before back in the day, but if you listen to Please Please Me, you can't imagine how Orbison would have done it. He nailed it. And so if you're thinking, wow.
What was your opinion of it as a Roy Orbison sort of big ballad? How did it strike you?
It would have worked for Roy Orbison. You know, the Beatles doing it, I can't imagine John and Paul singing it at that tempo, trying to emulate Orbison, because frankly, you know, apart from the BBC recording of Dream Baby, I know they were fans and they loved him and all that, but they're sort of different worlds. I don't see them really embracing that sound because, you know, his voice was so unique. He had this drama in everything he did in a way that the Beatles had a lighter touch, more pure rock and roll and comedic at times, soulfulness. So they didn't occupy the same lane. So now I get how it would have sounded had Roy done it, but I still don't get how the Beatles would have sounded doing it in Roy Orbison style. So, yeah. But anyway, Please Please Me, absolutely brilliant record. It was a tough one, but like I said, I went for the one that I thought was a little less sung, which is I Saw Her Standing There. And then, again, to give an intellectual value to I Saw Her Standing There, I find it really interesting. It's not a song that once they played it out of their sets in 63, I'm trying to think if they did it in 64 beyond the DC show. I can't remember if they did it in Australia or not, but once they quit doing it, I don't remember them retaking it up, say, during the Twickenham sessions or anything, as they were revisiting so much of their back catalog. I don't remember that being one of them, but apparently it was a song that in the back of their heads was so notable that here it is, 1974, John Lennon digs it up to play it with Elton John.
Yeah, go figure.
Yeah, and it's purposely, he says from an old estranged fiancé of mine named Paul, he sees it as a Paul song, though it was a collaboration. That's the song he wants to do to close out the set with Elton John. So that really puts it out there as something important, at least in their heads, you know?
That's a good observation that I hadn't considered that in selecting the song, that John selected it as one of his very last songs he performed live, maybe the last song he performed live. Yeah,
that's how he ended the three-song set. And he came out on stage and shook tambourine for Bitches Back when Elton did that as an encore, but it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
I said my gold was I Saw Her Standing There. I gave you my bronze. So my silver. Ask Me Why.
Okay.
The flip of Please Please Me, as it were.
Okay.
That was a song that, to go off on a tangent for a moment, Please Please Me was not the first Beatle album I heard. I would have heard the early Beatles before I heard Please Please Me. And I didn't buy Beatle albums in order. I had the Red and the Blue first. And then I think I either went with Sgt. Pepper or Abbey Road next, because those were sort of the heavy hitters. And when your funds are limited, you're going for the most bang for the buck. So I was trying to accrue things as I could. EJ Corvettes would have sales on the Beatles back catalog once in a while. So when I had some Christmas money, I'd get for $3.49, like Beatles 65 and early Beatles and things like that, just to get everything. But when I eventually did get the Please Please Me album proper, and I was already familiar with the songs from the early Beatles, and now you've got a couple extra with Misery, and There Is a Place. Overall, I liked it, but I didn't love it, the whole album. And I'll tell you why. I think by the time I actually got it, I had acquired a bootleg called the Decca Audition Tapes, which is not the Decca Audition Tapes. It's not. But I think it was in the Podrazik-Castleman book, All Together Now, that they pointed out what was exactly my sentiment, which is, in an alternate universe, this would have been a perfectly fine debut album. The way it was collated together, it started with I Got a Woman, and had Glad All Over, Don't Ever Change was on it, I Just Don't Understand, To Know Her Is to Love Her, I'm Gonna Sit Right Down and Cry, Honeymoon Song, Sure to Fall. It was a superb collection of BBC covers. I think almost all of them were covers. Slow Down is on there. And in some ways, I find that a more enjoyable collection of cover material than some of the covers they did on Please Please Me. Now, going to Please Please Me, Boys, I think, is the best cover on there. And Ringo owns that. Chains, Anna,
Yeah.
What else is on there? Taste of Honey.
Twist and Shout.
To me, they own that because they so reinvented that. What can I compare that to? Long Tall Sally. Little Richards is great, but what the Beatles did with theirs, and it's funny that I've had this observation before. Maybe it's the mythology attached to Twist and Shout that we know we got room for one more song in this record.
Yeah.
You got one performance in you. Everything's riding on this, John. What do you call it? A frantic guy trying to do his best. It's a great, great summary of that performance. And so he did it. Long Tall Sally, with a lot less riding on it, was likewise nailed in one take. And years of grinding that out on stage endless times. It's such a key record because that was the record that Michael Hill played for John Lennon, the Little Richard performance. He'd already heard Elvis to that point. Then when he heard that and then discovered it was a black guy doing it, it just blew his mind. But that was when he decided he wanted a future in rock and roll. It was a pivotal record, and it's the very last song they played live before a paying audience. So it has some importance to it. Maybe not the same backstory that Twist and Shout does for whatever reason, but to me, they're fairly equal.
You started to reference another cover, A Taste of Honey, and one feels a little awkward as well.
I don't dislike the song. They did it well at the Star Club, too. And you had the little, the annotations, a waste of money, what they're singing in the background.
Yeah.
To be sure, Paul had a real feel for ballads. Till There Was You is an amazing performance. We'll get to with the Beatles later. I don't begrudge any of that, but there's something about the choice of covers, as well as we know that Paul and John for sure had head colds. And the way it affects the sound of their voice, it's almost like listening to another band. The performances are fine, but it doesn't sound like Beatles to me as much as everything else they did. So that regrettably takes it down a notch. But then when I look at some of the material, like, okay, Anna, it's a decent song. I don't love it as much as other Arthur Alexander songs they did, like Soldier of Love or Where Have You Been All My Life? Those, I think, are superior songs, at least to me. If they had done those on Please Please Me, it would have gone up. That's my personal taste. To Know Him Is to Love Him is another song like Twist and Shout. Yeah, it's a cover, but I think they owned it. And, they did it at Decca. It's on the Star Club. It's on the BBC. John redid it for rock and roll. It clearly resonated with him. And all this circles back to the value I place on Ask Me Why is that I think it's a deceptively sophisticated piece of music. And there I am getting intellectual about something that I love, even if it lacked that. I love the feel. I love the sound of it. I came to it as a teenager when you're sort of having your first little romances in high school. Some people start earlier, some people start later. But so it had that resonance for me. It was like our song to the girl I was dating at the time. But also, it's an early, and we're talking the fourth side into the Beatles' recording career at EMI. So all we got to this point is Love Me Do, P.S., Please Please Me, and now this. So all of those songs, performances are what they are. They're original material. They're harmony-driven for the most part, or at least have vocal presence of the other singers in the band on them, as P.S. I Love You does. Anyway, here's John taking a lead vocal. There's no harmony alongside it as you get with Please Please Me. But what you do get is the first example of that inherent soulfulness that John had. That tear in his voice, some people described it, but something that, there's been a lot of debate because people love to quantify and love to compete and love to pit things against each other. And I hate that shit. But just to throw it out there as something people do, John versus Paul as singers. And I think that the sort of conclusion people seem to have is that while Paul had deeper chops, he also had more affectation. Like he approached it like a method actor. I'm going to do my rocker now, or I'm going to do my ballad voice now, or whatever.
And actually, to your point, sorry to interrupt you, that's how I feel about his performance of Taste of Honey. He's kind of posing. Yes. It doesn't feel real. And I think I know where you're going, that when John does a song, it feels
like
real.
It absolutely means something to him directly.
Sorry to
no, it's fine. You're just making my point for me. And that's, you don't have to know about his backstory. You don't have to know about the traumas of his life. It comes through loud and clear. So that is something you can't train or hone. It's just there or it isn't. It's funny when you listen to the recordings that made public of the Quarrymen on the day John and Paul were introduced. There's, let's see, how old would he have been? He hadn't turned 17 yet. 16-year-old John Lennon. It's unmistakably John Lennon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the irony is, here's a guy, he's an egomaniac about an awful lot, but he hated his own voice.
Yeah, go figure.
The most unique gift he had.
Which kind of reminds me of the Decca tapes. To me, when I listen to that, John sounds fine to me, though I think, and others have said he doesn't. It's Paul that sounds off to me. And Paul sounds like he's trying too hard to sound like Elvis. He's posing. He's trying to be something, whereas John, like, it is what it is.
Trying too hard and Paul McCartney in the same sentence. How many times do you find that? That's not a diss on Paul, people. We're fans here. But no, that was Dick Lester's exact words about Paul when he cut his solo scenes out of both Hard Day's Night and Help with Paul. He tries too hard. It was, what's his name? Roger Waters. During 73, the recording at EMI, Dark Side of the Moon. And he's going around with a tape recorder, getting people on tape to talk. And Henry McCullough ended up making the cut. I was too drunk at the time when they asked when was the last time he got into a fight. And so that ended up on the album. Paul and Linda's bit ended up being discarded completely because they felt the need to put on an act. And it's like, no, just be yourself. So yes, trying too hard is something that pops up now and again with Paul, whereas John, yes, what you heard is what you got. And yeah, so anyway, Ask Me Why. It's soulful.
Nice.
I thought the lyric was decent for capturing that sort of naive, early love kind of thing. It's just a sweet thing. And if anybody reads Anthony Robustelli's book, I Want to Tell You, it's a sort of a musicologist dive into. That was the first time I read anybody making the case that by components and construction, it's a jazz song. For all John rapping on jazz, that he hated it. And I think at some point the point was made, what he really hated was the people that were into it and not necessarily the music. And I get that because there's been plenty of bands I've hated. When I thought about it, well, I don't really hate the bands. I hate the people that are into it. So I get that.
All right, great. That's an interesting selection. And that's your gold. No. That was
my
your
silver. Yeah. On another, it might have been gold. So to recap, Do You Want to Know a Secret? Bronze. Ask Me Why? Silver. I Saw Her Standing There? Gold. And yours were?
Bronze. Do You Want to Know a Secret? Silver. I Saw Her Standing There. And gold. Please, Please Me.
There you go.
One other, Anna, the Arthur Alexander song that John does, was under consideration for my bronze. And actually, the reason I didn't go down that road was the exact point that you made, that he and Paul had colds during the recording. And in particular, you sort of hear a nasal quality to his vocal in Anna that just doesn't feel like John to me.
Right. I have, apart from that, absent the head cold aspect, the performances are fine. The soulfulness is there. It's just, I think it's lesser Arthur Alexander material than other songs by him they did. I like Soldier of Love much more. Where Have You Been All My Life? I've always loved. A Shot of Rhythm and Blues is another song they did of his. I think those are all better songs. Yeah. Anna's just a little meh for me. Chains, I like the way George attacks that, but it's certainly not the best thing out of Goffin and King. Those are the ones who wrote it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what is interesting when you think about what might have been, why they didn't do To Know Him Is to Love Him when that was such a key part of their stage act for years, and yet they didn't do it when they were going into the studio. Maybe they just wanted to do something a little bit different, fresher. Maybe they thought too many people were doing it. But like I said, I feel they owned it. Some Other Guy was a song they so laid claim to for a long time. They were playing that well into 63. They didn't do that. And that's an interesting one because it's a great rocker showing off what they could do. They thought enough of it to perform it when they were being filmed for TV for the first time.
Right.
And then they did it on TV for the first time on Seen and Heard. So it's interesting, or Seen at 6:30. It's interesting to me that didn't make the cut, although it was an esteemed song of theirs. So I'd wondered, I had this sort of inner dialogue with myself. The 3 original songs they did at Decca, Hello, Little Girl, Love of the Loved, Like Dreamers Do. What do we think of those songs as material that should have been recorded at EMI or shouldn't have been? Does any of that live up to the standard? Do you think, let it be?
I think Paul's are stronger, but they don't make it for me.
Going again to the earlier point we both made about Decca and Paul, I do think his performances, to whatever extent you can enjoy them, is charming. And maybe you enjoy them if you saw him performing them. As records enshrined in vinyl for repeat listenings, he's trying too hard, to a little over the top. That said, I don't fault them as compositions. So maybe if they had revisited them with a real producer, maybe George Martin could have turned them into something superior to what we hear at Decca. I don't know.
That's a great point.
There's not a lot of Decca that if they revisited the material, and some songs they did, like Money, obviously a big, huge difference, and not just Ringo versus Pete Best. I thought it was too fast. John sounds not as controlled at Decca in doing that performance of Money. We know they were nervous and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that apart from the novelty material like Chic of Araby and Three Cool Cats, that stuff they didn't need to put on to re-record in the studio at all. But I thought the originals had potential, but they were so developing so quickly as writers that maybe they thought it was like looking back. Hello, Little Girl, when I hear it as like a straight Buddy Holly homage, it would have been interesting to see that develop in a more mature of a fashion. But I think they're just kind of rushing through it to throw it out on the table. It's like, well, we wrote this, but they didn't give it its due. But anyway, that's my take on that.
You referenced Buddy Holly. I've never enjoyed their interpretation of Words of Love. So maybe picking up on your point, if they had taken Hello, Little Girl as sort of a Buddy Holly and updated it, I probably would have enjoyed that a lot more.
That's interesting. I wonder why you didn't like Words of Love.
I don't like the guitar sound to it. It doesn't sound, I don't know, it doesn't do it for me.
Oh, and you don't have to quantify that. That's interesting though to me. I love
Buddy Holly. Actually, to your point, Robert, if I pick a Buddy Holly song to redo, I would pick dozens before that one. I don't think it's a particularly strong song to begin with.
What I like about it is the fact that, again, maybe this is intellectualizing, but I also like how it moves me. John and Paul close harmonizing on somebody they revered. I like the blend of their voices, but I'm not going to argue with you. You got to like this song, damn it. I would have loved to have heard their take of Think It Over. That's a song we know that they did, and that it's one of my favorite Buddy records. So I would have liked to have heard their treatment of that.
Yeah.
I know Ringo did it recently, but it's not the same thing, is it? To put it one way.
All right. Should we move on to With the Beatles?
We shall.
Okay. So I'll lead off. My bronze goes to the opening track. It Won't Be Long.
Oh, interesting.
In a lot of the early years, I find myself returning to the same word, exciting.
Very.
For me, this song is exciting. John establishes the pain of being without her. Everybody's having fun and I'm on my own. The verses, he establishes the pain in the verses. And then the gentle bridge, since you left me, I'm so alone. That great overlapping harmony that, you might correct me on this, I don't know that they ever applied that kind of overlapping singing in any other song. And I think that sounds terrific.
What about Help?
I feel like that was more answering and responding as opposed to singing.
So it's sort of like counter melodies on top of each other. Like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I hear It Won't Be Long. I see your point about Help, but to me, they're not singing on top of each other. They're just sort of and then there's the payoff at the end, that joyous burst of You're Coming Home.
Yeah.
So it just pays off the song so well. He's told about his pain, about his loneliness. And then you just feel that burst of excitement. You're coming home.
Yep, that only made your bronze. It's like you're describing something that should be gold.
Well, as we all know, even Bad Beatles is pretty damn good.
Yes, it is. I've always loved that song. It's brilliant for all the reasons you described. But the fact is, yes, he's describing a sad situation, but he's anticipating the joy. And that exuberance and joy just so pops. And they're leading off the album with this. This is like really upping the ante from 1, 2, 3, 4 of their previous effort. This is like right out of the gate. And it's so damn good. I have to tell you, With the Beatles was a much more challenging album for me to narrow down to 3 tracks because what's good on there is really good. And it's a tough one. But that one definitely on some days would make maybe as high as My Gold. It's an amazing song. I steered clear of it on my list for today's show just because there was other things that I wanted to shine a light on. But that's absolutely a good choice. I'm glad you picked that one. My bronze. So there's definitely songs that are easier to rule out than others. But there's so many damn good songs on this album. So I guess my bronze for this one, and it's referencing something I mentioned earlier, is Till There Was You. Because it's a song that they didn't need to be doing as a rock and roll band. And so, again, ultimately, I love the performance of it. But now I'm starting to proceed to give you intellectual reasons why it's an important song. It's a hard thing to separate, but yeah, I think he owns the performance of it. He's got a good grasp for a guy that did a lot of Little Richard screaming. He can sing a ballad well, something he has no business singing because it's not a rock and roll song. It's not what he's been putting all his musical effort into, but this is the musicality that informed the first part of their life. Show tunes and Broadway standards and Tin Pan Alley and whatever else. So it shows that they could handle something other than rock and roll. But then there's the George performance, which is just superlative. Probably for the same reason. He was absorbing all this non-rock and roll stuff, and here he is, this beautiful spotlight for it. We've talked about this on the show before with Mike Pichelli, who, again, it's like me reading George's comments on Octopus's Garden. It put icing on something I already liked anyway, and that is how unique and brilliant, for lack of a better term, George's solo is for this performance that he had mapped out as of January 1st, 1962, because he does the same thing at Decca. So here he is in the Pete Best era. He's got a vision mapped out for that song. You know, a lot of people revere the Jeff Emmerich book, I think, because of it bringing you into the studio. As a work of historiography, it's pretty worthless. But the big takeaway is, okay, he's got a score here to settle with George. He doesn't like George. He's going to put him down at every turn and fault him for not spontaneously being able to come up with solos and be able to jam 12 bars or whatever, the way other guitarists specialize in. He wasn't that guy. Well, Till There Was You is the payoff to why he's not that guy, because George is inherently a composer. He's able to take a piece of material, as he did with Lennon McCartney's material from day one, and here is something that's not Lennon McCartney, and come up with a little suite within it for that period he's given the spotlight that makes it all the more enhanced and worthwhile and memorable. So you got to give him props for that.
I just keep nodding my head. I couldn't agree with you more. That solo really elevates the song. To my ears, even as a youngster, it's an element of sophistication to the song. A bit of just gravitas is maybe not the right word. Sophistication. It adds a level of sophistication.
It transcends the material. Song. Yeah, transcendental.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
and what's also great about it is, thank God they did it for the Sullivan Show, because now we've got it caught on video, and just the presentation of that, the little flourish.
Yeah.
You know, it's impossible after whatever age I saw the Sullivan Show for the first time. I picture that when I'm hearing the song, what he looks like playing that solo. It's tremendous. Yeah. So, is it my favorite song in the world? Hell no. But is it a great achievement for them that I enjoy listening to? Sure, absolutely.
I hear you. Silver goes to Not a Second Time. For me, I'm a sucker for a John Lennon vocal. His voice just goes right to the center of me. It always did. And so it's a killer vocal. Ringo's drums are dramatic, but not overcooked. George Martin adds piano to the track. And to me, that gives it a little bit of richness to the sound that maybe exists on other songs because they didn't have a piano. And for me, that piano sort of deepens the sadness, the emotional pull of the song.
Well, you just took my gold. Everything you said. It's funny. Did you ever hear the show? It must have been the Keyboard Show with Jeff Martin. And he surprised me by saying that that was a song he sort of downgraded. I hope I'm remembering the right guy, the right guest, because that would have been an opportunity for us to talk about it. But I think it was Jeff Martin. But anyway, just that he thought it didn't sound like a Beatle record, or that it had no place on a Beatles record. It was like something else. That was like your parents' music or something like that. It was jarring to him. And for that reason, I remember being shocked hearing this. It's like, how can you not love this record? Everything about it, it sets a mood, it sustains it. It's a different flavor for John, expressing that soulfulness normally within a guitar-based setting. Here it is, piano sort of dominating alongside Ringo's drums are standout, as you say. There's no real harmonies on it. It's a pure vocal performance. You know, if you're a purist, you'll hate what I'm about to say, but on Meet the Beatles, it's the closing track. And it gives it that sort of wistfulness as the record is ending in the same way I'll Be Back would on A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
You're not going out with a bang, which is what they tended to do more often in the early days, and they did, and with the Beatles with Money. But you're going out with this sort of trailing off. You've established this mood, and now that's going to be what you're carrying away. Is you're sad the Beatles record's over, but you're also sad for his heartbreaking and all that stuff. And to me, the further proof of, again, I don't want to quantify stuff. I hate falling into that trap. And I'm going to walk right into it. A great singer like Robert Palmer, who did a version of it as well. Yeah. And I believe Chrissy Hynde did too. So clearly other singers found some meat there that they could take this overlooked, underrated track. It's never been compiled. I don't even think, off the top of my head, I don't remember if it's on Love Songs or any of the ballad compilations or anything. But to me, it was always a standout track. It's just something that's unique and doesn't sound like anything else. For that reason, I tend to pay a little extra attention. And it's like, wow, this is really good. So that's my gold. And we'll get to my silver when we get to it.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead with my gold then.
Yes.
All My Loving, a wonderful melody. It could be cheesy. It could veer into cheesiness. But John's rhythm guitar playing just sort of solidifies it almost. A nice bridge. It's always been curious to me that George does the harmony vocal, and I think it's brilliant. I think they sound great together. I don't know why George is the harmony on that one. He
does it live, but Paul does it with himself on the record.
Oh, is that right? You know, it's funny you say that because I remember growing up on the album, it said that he double-tracked his vocal. But when I was preparing for the show, I listened to it again, and it didn't sound double-tracked to me. So thank you for correcting
my
error.
And I think that John, so preoccupied with the fast strum, wasn't in position to do much more than the ooze on the bridge.
Yeah. And actually, in that Rick Rubin 1-2-3 documentary, if my memory serves, Paul sort of checks a lot of boxes in that thing, specifically on this song. Something to the effect of, it may not seem like much to you, but you try and do what John did for 2.5 minutes and see if you can do it. So to your point, John maybe just had a lot of other things to worry about. And I guess you'll know this. I don't know this. If this is the first time that Paul double tracks a vocal or a harmony, does this sort of set the stage for John's ongoing kind of resentment of when Paul does things without him?
Well, I wonder, it's unknowable at this point. Was it his idea? Oh, I'm going to do a Les Paul, Mary Ford, take advantage of, I have the capability, therefore I'm going to do it. Was it George Martin said, hey, Paul, why don't you do it? And maybe it wasn't even his idea at all. It's impossible to know with certainty. But what gets curious in the years ahead is songs where they harmonize with themselves and then they have the other guy harmonize with them on the same track. Like an example, that would be, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. There's parts where John does his own harmony and where it's clearly Paul doing his harmony. So how these decisions were made, I have no idea, other than maybe ultimately, let's try this, and if it sounds good, we'll keep it. Yeah,
gotcha. And the only other thing I would add to All My Loving, just a big falsetto finish at the end. That's always a nice touch, you know.
The little Richard Woo.
So that's it.
The little Richard Woo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a tough one. And I think because that song, it's funny, it's so ubiquitous, and it was their opening song in America on Ed Sullivan's Stage. Yeah. You would have thought it was a hit single in America. And apparently it was a Canadian single, I think, but maybe certainly got the airplay, but it wasn't a formal single anywhere, UK or US at least. But it's one of these songs that, again, a fairly early standard of Paul, a song that sounds like it's been around forever, like Do You Want to Know a Secret? And anybody can cover it and do versions of it. And yeah, so that one, I think it's gotten its glory, so I didn't choose that one for my gold.
So actually, I want to pose a question. It's such a curiosity to me that they started the Ed Sullivan performance with All My Loving. See, it's a great song. I've got no issues with that. But to your point, it was not a hit. And it's also so Paul-centric, as opposed to something like I Want to Hold Your Hand or Please Please Me, Twist and Shout, where it's more a group approach.
Yeah.
And so I love it, but I'm surprised they made that choice. Do you know why they made that choice?
That's a good question. I find it easier to speculate on why they did Till There Was You, because they're on a TV platform that specializes in show tunes and Broadway performances. And if they're out trying to win over every demographic, knowing who's in front of the tube, you definitely want to throw that in there. Just like Elvis doing Peace in the Valley when he was on Sullivan's show last time. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I know in 63, 64, their set lists were a lot less rigid than they would become during the later touring years. So I don't know if it was part of their normal set. Well, and we know it was for Hollywood Bowl and stuff like that. But as far as a set opener goes, I don't know if it was. There might have been maybe some British TV show where they started with it first. I'm not really 100% sure on that.
Oh, actually, now that we're having this discussion, I'm remembering, you're going to correct me on this if I'm wrong. I think they recorded 3 or 4 songs previous, and they were saved for another show.
You're talking about Sullivan?
Yeah. Does that ring a bell? Like the songs that we saw on the show were not the original order. Does that make any sense?
Okay. So I think what you're referring to is February 9th, the debut night. That was live real time, them on stage.
Okay.
Because they did 3 straight weeks. The next week was Miami. That was real time live. The third week, they were back in England, and what they broadcast was them on tape during one of the dress rehearsals, I think done on the 9th or maybe the 8th.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of. So
that one was canned.
Okay, got it.
As far as the order they were formed, I really don't know that, but it was on tape.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So my silver then, not a second time being my gold, Little Child. To me, it's another overlooked, undervalued performance. And we're really talking about a performance here. As a song, it is slight. Would You Dance With Me? I was thinking the other day about how many songs John sang that referenced dancing. Twist and Shout being number one. What was the one they were playing on the radio?
I'm Happy Just to Dance With You. He wrote for George.
But there was something else he sang that I heard the other day. It's an early song, and I can't remember it, where they referenced dancing. And this one, certainly Little Child, If You Want to Dance With Me. Rock and roll music is another one, of course, but that's a cover. Maybe that was what it was. But he's probably the Beatle you least associate with dancing. Ringo, by reputation, was the best dancer out of them. George was a dancer. Paul, I could see doing it, or at least doing formal stuff like foxtrots or something. But John's probably the least one, I would imagine. Let's go dancing. I don't see it. But anyway, he does evoke it a lot in song. And Little Child is such a great performance. He does a fantastic harmonica solo on it. Technically, I don't know if it's great, but he just seems so enthusiastic, and they're rocking. You got the great piano in the background. So here's George Martin, this non-rock and roll creature. Boy, is he getting his learning curve up to speed right away. He's able to just join in and enhance these performances. And so a great, wildly enthusiastic performance. And for that, I don't think it gets enough attention.
I totally agree. Love it. I loved it back in the day. I love it now. Full of energy, wonderful harmonica.
It's funny, the other song in that series of recordings, I Want to Be Your Man, I think it aspires to that without quite pulling it off. And there's a very big difference between the studio performance and the way they did it live. I guess ultimately I like the Stones version.
I just don't think it's a well-written song. I just think it's kind of a boring song. I want to be your man. I want to be your man. Yeah.
We're not going to give them anything good, right?
Just to me, it's not. It's just not interesting.
And that's why I think they kept reverting to Boys wherever possible.
End of part 1. Intermission.
Something About the Beatles. Created and hosted by Robert Rodriguez. Executive producer Rick Way. Title song by the Corgis.
Okay, listen, have we got enough, do you think?
Can you do so? Yeah, finish off this one.
Oh, go on.
Round the piano, right on, right. You know that
Which
one.
one is that?
The holly and the mustard. The holly and the mustard went out one Christmas night. Oh, what is it? How do you do that one? The holly and the... How do you do that? I don't know that one.
I don't know the tune. On the first day of Christmas, like true love baked a cake. Good blimey cake, good blimey cake.
Good blimey cake. Good
blimey cake, good blimey cake, good blimey cake.
And a parson in his pear tree. On the second day of Christmas, my true love sent to me. Boo, boo, ba-doo, ba-doo, boom.
My God, we're not doing that.
And a parson in his pear tree.
On the third day of Christmas, my true love said to me, one better humming, two sailors coming.